There is a place in Australia where just 6 permanent residents live at the heart of a cattle station nearly half the size of Tasmania. Elsewhere, a settlement of only 110 people suddenly surges to 6,000 for a single weekend before emptying out again. And in another location, officially shut down in 1997, for individuals simply refuse to leave. What makes these towns unusual is not that they are fading away or barely surviving in the way one might assume. The most isolated towns in Australia are not necessarily the ones that were deserted. Instead, they are the communities where people deliberately chose to remain, even as every national trend and practical consideration seemed to urge them to go. To grasp the magnitude of this story, it helps to understand the scale involved. Less than 5% of Australians live in the Outback, despite it covering a landmass roughly equivalent to the contiguous United States. Meanwhile, 95% of the population crowds along the coastal fringe. In some interior regions, fewer people are actively managing land today than at any other time in 50,000 years of continuous human habitation. This is not a sentimental longing for simpler days. It is an unprecedented withdrawal. Like a receding tide, the population has drawn back toward the coasts, leaving behind a vast, continent-sized emptiness. Schools shut their doors, services merge or disappear, and young people depart for cities that promise employment, connection, and the essential infrastructure of modern life. Yet scattered across this emptiness are resilient pockets of human presence, towns that defy economic logic. In these places, the nearest neighbor may live an hour away, the closest hospital might require a flight, and traffic lights are described to children like something from a fairy tale. It raises a fundamental question. How small can a town become before it ceases to be a town at all? William Creek provides one answer. With between 6 and 10 permanent residents, it consists of a single pub, one airstrip, and a general store that also serves as the post office. Surrounding it on all sides lies Anna Creek Station, which at its peak covered 34,000 square kilometers, an immense cattle operation nearly half the size of Tasmania. The image is almost surreal. One dusty street, a few sun-scorched buildings, and then nothing but an endless horizon. No trees interrupt the flatness. No hills suggest life beyond sight. Only heat shimmering above red earth, and the knowledge that the next substantial town is hours away. Inside the pub, business cards blanket the walls from floor to ceiling. Thousands have been left by travelers passing through, each card marking someone who paused for a drink, stared in awe at the emptiness, and then continued onward. For the permanent residents, this steady stream of visitors is an annual ritual. During special events, the population can temporarily climb past 100 as pilots, tourists, and gray nomads venture into Australia's empty center. When they depart, the handful of locals remain behind to run the pub, maintain the airstrip, keep fuel pumps operating, and anchor human life in a landscape vast enough to swallow small countries without notice. While William Creek survives partly on tourism, other towns were built for entirely different purposes. Cook, located on the Nullarbor Plain 800 kilometers from Port Augusta, tells the story of a town that refused to die. In its heyday, Cook housed hundreds of residents and boasted a school, hospital, and swimming pool. During World War II, it even accommodated Italian prisoners of war. The town existed because steam locomotives required water and servicing, and the railway demanded a constant human presence. When diesel engines replaced steam and welded track reduced maintenance needs, Cook's purpose evaporated. Services closed one after another. By 1997, the town was effectively shut down, its buildings condemned and residents relocated. Yet 4 people stayed. Twice a week, they refuel the Indian Pacific as it passes through. Tourists disembark for 15 minutes, wander among faded signs and condemned structures, one pleading, "Our hospital needs your help," then reboard and leave. Cook lingers in a kind of indefinite hospice, sustained by a train schedule and the determination of those who refuse to relocate. Other towns have discovered a different path, not merely surviving, but thriving in bursts. Birdsville, home to 110 permanent residents at the edge of the Simpson Desert and the northern terminus of the 500-kilometer unsealed Birdsville Track, lives a quiet existence for most of the year. It provides fuel, food, cold beer, and rest to desert travelers. Everyone knows everyone else simply because there are so few names to remember. Then September transforms everything. The Birdsville races draw more than 6,000 people to a town designed for just over 100. Aircraft line the airstrip wing to wing. The pub pours until kegs run dry, and campfires flicker across the desert like a temporary city conjured from dust. Visitors arrive from Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide to watch horses race on a remote track beneath a sky so saturated with stars it appears unreal. When the weekend ends, planes lift off, fires die out, dust settles, and the 110 residents remain, their economy reliant on this single event and gray nomad tourism during cooler months. A failed racing season, a pandemic, or a shift in travel habits could unravel the delicate balance. Isolation becomes even more extreme in Kalumburu, perched at the northernmost tip of Western Australia, 550 kilometers from Kiwirrkurra along a rough four-wheel drive route that effectively vanishes during the wet season. For 4 to 6 months each year, flooding cuts off all vehicle access. The community depends on a sealed, night-lit airstrip and sea barge deliveries. About 400 residents live here, 88% of them Aboriginal, preserving language, law, and connection to country despite seasonal attempts by nature to erase their presence. In 1943, Japanese aircraft bombed Kalumburu, forcing relocation of the airfield. Remnants of wartime activity stilled the area. Rebuilding has been a constant process, after bombings, after each wet season. Although roads reopen and planes fly year-round, this is their country, and they choose to remain. Further still lies Kiwirrkurra, officially described as Australia's most remote community. Positioned between the Gibson Desert and the Great Sandy Desert, it stands 700 kilometers from Alice Springs and 1,200 kilometers from Port Hedland. With no sealed roads, only tracks dissolving into red sand. Approximately 165 Pinnippi people live here. They operate their own arts center, ranger program, and health clinic, holding native title over 43,000 square kilometers, an expanse larger than Switzerland. Elders fought to keep language, law, and land at the core of community life. Their art hangs in galleries worldwide, and traditional fire management practices protect country that might otherwise burn uncontrolled. In this case, isolation does not equate to cultural decline, but to cultural strength. Between these extremes are towns balanced precariously on the edge. Inaminka, with about 12 permanent residents, was abandoned in the 1950s before re-emerging as an outback oasis. Burke and Wills perished nearby on their ill-fated expedition, yet the town has endured more than a century longer. Udnadatta, home to 160 people at a former railway terminus, reinvented itself after trains stopped arriving, turning the Pink Roadhouse into a pilgrimage point for four-wheel drive travelers. Kiwirrkurra, in far northwestern New South Wales, with 134 residents, watched decades pass after its gold rush origins. The road from Broken Hill was only sealed in 2020, once requiring true commitment to reach. Marble Bar, officially Australia's hottest town, recorded temperatures above 37.8 degrees Celsius for 160 consecutive days in 1923 and 1924. Roads can melt in summer, and residents either embrace the heat as identity or leave. Finally, there is Kiwirrkurra, a town of 53 residents slowly being swallowed by sand. Its 19th-century telegraph station lies half-buried beneath advancing dunes. Doorways open into compacted sand. Windows reveal only more dunes inching forward year by year. Once a critical link in communications between London and Sydney, Kiwirrkurra now watches its past disappear. Even cemetery headstones had to be relocated because the dunes kept covering them. In 1971, locals staged the Nullarbor nymph hoax, circulating photographs of a half-naked woman supposedly living among kangaroos to draw attention. Absurd and obviously fabricated, the story succeeded in attracting tourists and briefly reminding the outside world that Kiwirrkurra existed. Today, from a modern roadhouse overlooking the Nullarbor Plain and the Great Australian Bight, residents witness entropy firsthand, sand gradually overcoming stone. Across all these examples, one reality remains clear. Australia's population has retreated to the coasts, leaving the outback emptier than at any point in 50,000 years. Economic logic, demographic momentum, and practical reasoning all suggest departure. Yet in Kiwirrkurra, William Creek, Cook, Eucla, and Birdsville, people stay. While homes in Sydney might sell for $2 million, in William Creek a house can cost little more than a used car. The contrast is not merely financial. It reflects differing ideas about value, sacrifice, and belonging. The real question is not why these towns feel lonely. It is what their residents understand about belonging that the rest of US may have forgotten.